Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. My guest today on the Wisdom of is Dr Naba Alfayadh, and she's an emergency medicine doctor. She's a social entrepreneur, and she's the founder of Rahma Health. It's a global charity serving more than 3 million Arabic-speaking families, but delivering its solutions in both Arabic and English. She's a former Iraqi refugee, and she's now leading research-backed, culturally safe initiatives. And we're going to dig into what does that even mean. And they double as parental health literacy. She wants to inspire lasting behavioural change. We've been chatting. She actually wants to inspire worldwide lasting behavioural change, and her work bridges medicine, technology, and most specifically love. So she's guided by a simple belief: when we change how we love our children, we can change the future. And that's a really interesting place for us to lean in, Nava, and get started. So thank you so much for doing this for us, and welcome to the Wisdom of.
Thank you so much, Simon, for having me. I've followed your work and your podcast. It's absolutely incredible. I'm so humbled to be here today and so excited to learn from you.
It's my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. And, we're going to learn from you. You're young, you're motivated, but you're motivated by changing the world. So there'll be a lot that we'll gain out of this at the wisdom level. So
Thank you. Thank
where
you
should
so
we
much,
start?
Simon. Simon, I'd love to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I wanted to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of Naarm, Melbourne, where I live and work. At Rahma, we really admire the knowledge and wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who've been caring for, loving, and parenting children on this land for over 65,000 years. At Rahma, we learn so much from these incredible cultures and incredible communities. For example, the wisdom on actually leaning into life transitions and using the community for support through life transitions like matrescence when you become a mother.
Yeah.
Our capitalist, fast-paced, materialist world is sometimes incompatible with raising mentally healthy, whole children. And so it's such a privilege to be in Australia and to learn from the longest living culture, longest continuous living culture in human history, and to learn from that real ancient wisdom. It's such a privilege.
We can, and so for the people internationally who might not be aware, you can be welcomed to country by tribal elders and representatives, and only by Indigenous elders. But you can acknowledge the country that you're on, and country was so important to our, to the Indigenous population and to the Aboriginal culture. And there's a lot of wisdom, right? I mean, have you ever stopped to think about to have a 65,000 year continuous culture? You have to we're already off on a tangent, but you have to pass down a lot of history for a lot of years to have a 65,000-year-old continuous culture. And, Australians benefit from being able to see that firsthand. Have you ever thought about what does it take to pass down a culture continuously for 65,000 years? But, no computers, no pens and paper, no data banks, databases or anything. You learn from this culture in terms of the work that you're doing. Have you ever given thought to what it takes to pass on that wisdom over so long?
What an insightful question, Simon. It's, I guess it can take hours to think through this question. It's so deep. What it makes me think of is the balance and the harmony that they must have had in living in harmony with the environment, living in harmony with each other, that they continue replenishing and replenishing and replenishing the culture and supporting each other, caring for this land, and continuing the culture and just evolving it and making it more rich and more more incredible as they went on and on and on. They didn't
Yeah.
destroy what was around them. They didn't destroy each other, and it still continues to today. I think it just it makes me realize the incredible advantage that we have in learning from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in caring for the land and in caring for each other. It is
Mm.
unfortunate that then settler colonialism came and the massacres came and the horrible atrocities were perpetrated. But the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are leading incredible healing, which the whole world is learning from, including our communities who've experienced war and settler colonialism and intergenerational trauma. We are really grateful for the healing that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community is leading, and we're
Yeah.
learning so much from it.
And there's such a risk of the loss of culture, actually, as modernization, not just here, but worldwide. I mean, this is a pattern that's been repeated in a lot of places. The industrial machine runs over a lot of things. And, industry is okay. It's propelled us forward. But a lot of the older cultures, one of the things I think about this a lot, how do you pass down all of the cultural history over 65,000 years? And, if you spend time engaged, there's a lot of pause in the way they tell their stories and share their histories. They naturally move to the rhythm of the land. They have 6 seasons of the year, not 4, that
True.
more accurately represent what's actually happening. You can only do that if you slow down enough to notice what is happening. And I think wisdom and speed are incompatible. And wisdom and pause, go hand in hand. And then, of course, they drew, which is close to me. They drew on cave walls and things like that. They communicated in pictures, not written word, because the human brain absorbs imagery so much more powerfully. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for acknowledging the lands that you're on. And I hope it might spark other people outside of Australia to maybe even study that culture, because I think many Australians are proud of it. It has had challenges and been challenged over the years, but hopefully we're moving forward in a really different direction with that. Let's talk about.
Simon, before we move on, I wanted to reflect on that. I think your work is amazing in getting humans, getting people, getting communities, getting organizations to reflect on the importance of wisdom. And, perhaps that's something that you've learned from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and, inherent human wisdom that we all share. It's incredible that you've spent your whole career reflecting on the importance of wisdom and slowing down and reflecting. How did you end up doing that? Like, what sparked the idea in you? What made you realize that you wanted to spend your whole life studying wisdom?
Well, I came to it in adulthood. I grew up in very small country towns in Western Australia, and I'm talking about 900 people and 400 people and
Oh,
things like that.
wow.
So farming communities, and I'm in a
Mm.
big family. I have 45 first cousins on dad's side of the family, and farmers actually have to go to the rhythm of the land. The crop grows at the speed at which the crop grows, right? And the fleece grows at the speed at which the fleece grows. And so, all
No
of
matter
all of
how
my
anxious you are, you can't speed it up.
doesn't matter, right? And it rains or it doesn't, right? So just deal with what's happening um, in the best way that you know how. And all of my youth and even my early adult years were lived in country regions. And I originally was in electrics and electronics, which is a science-based discipline, and I love the sciences, but I just had a fascination with human behavior and psychology, and so I had this hiccup where I thought I'd be a high school teacher until I realised you had to be able to manage teenagers for 50 years, and I thought I don't have the vocational fortitude to do that, so I'm going to have to deal with adults, and that sent me down this path. And then through a series of roles in companies, executive roles, and things like that, I became acutely aware at a very young adult age that we create a lot of push and urgency, and we make a lot of mistakes because of it, right? And
Yeah.
I played sport at a reasonably elite level, and I've been a naturally inquisitive person, and so I tend to look at a lot of things to figure out what's happening. And one of the most effective tactics in sport is the pause and a head fake. So you know, if you're in basketball, you're bouncing down the court, a player is shadowing you, trying to defend you and get the ball off you. And if you just stop and pause and give a head fake, they will go to where your head fakes, and then you have a pathway forward. So pause is not just something that's nice to do. It is a strategic advantage. And so then what happens because of the pause, and of course, psychology took me into a whole lot of discoveries about what's actually going on. And so, you know, there's Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, Austrian psychologist living through the Holocaust, talked about the space between stimulus and response. And animals, the pathway for animals is stimulus, instinct, response. And Frankl said, you know, humans have free will between stimulus and response. And that's where all choice and freedom lives. But what humans do is exhibit learned behavior. So humans go stimulus, learned behavior, response, which means they get the same outcome all the time. But if they only exercise their free will, and that's what he saw in the psychology of the concentration camps. And so then my work, and particularly the work we do with models, really dialed in on how do we influence the choices that people make in the space between stimulus and response. And that affected how I then sold and sort of coached my sales teams that I was leading in companies and things like that. All leadership, teaching, parenting, consulting, selling, it occurs in the space between stimulus and response.
Wow.
I'll say that again. All teaching occurs in the space between stimulus and response, because you have someone in front of you who's reacting to a stimulus, and they're going to get a response that's determined by their learned behavior. But the stimulus is actually a repeat of the learned behavior they've been exhibiting up to this point. And so all teaching, all leadership, all consulting, all advice, all selling is about occupying that space between stimulus and response. But there's some caveats. You can't enter that space with ego, because then you end up in an ego to ego battle. So you actually have to enter the space detached from the outcome, and just create pause, because the antithesis of learned behavior is pause. We create pause by drawing visual models. As soon as you draw, you slow people down without telling them to slow down. Frame a different perspective. So pause, framing, and then get the person to test that new frame of reference against their current frame of reference. It's not my job to enter the space between someone else's stimulus and response and force a choice on them, because Frankl said free will is where all choice and freedom lives. So if I make the choice for you, I'm taking away your freedom. What I have to do is position you to make a better choice. So we got real deep real fast, but
no, Simon, this is amazing. I love your framing, because this is the core of my work with parents, to make them realize that it's not stimulus response. It could be stimulus intergenerational pattern, intergenerational trauma response. And so your child might be screaming in the room, and if you just slow down, you don't have to scream, or you don't have to fight, flight. You don't have to freeze. You don't have to do whatever your intergenerational pattern response is. If you do just slow down as a parent, that could be the whole healing that the relationship needs, and that could create secure attachment and could create unconditional love and all the things that we talk about at Rahma. So I love that framing.
If we're up for it, I can draw it for you.
Yes, definitely.
if we're up for you. So, and I'll draw it specific to what you're talking about. So, you know, obviously we have a stimulus on one side and we have response on the other. And in reality, this is about, the stimulus is a presentation of the past, because this is what's happening right now. Something's happening right now that I don't like. Could be something I do like, but there's something happening right now, which is a culmination of the past up to this moment, right? The response is actually the future. So whatever the response is It's going to create the future. Now, in animals, that happens through instinct.
Okay.
And so I have a little border collie poodle cross, and the border collie is strong in him. So when he's coming to get me, he herds me to where he wants. So the stimulus is, I want to go and play with him.
Yeah.
The response will be, I've dragged him out into the backyard and now we're playing. Everything in the middle is instinct. What he knows how to do is herd. So his behavior in the middle is instinctive. And so Frankl said that space is free will in humans, but most people don't exercise that free will. And so this is where all choice, and that was specific, all choice and freedom lives in the space between stimulus and response. Think about how bold that statement is.
Wow.
From someone who's coming up with this in the concentration camps.
Yeah.
Basically saying, I have freedom here because I have choice, I have free will. But what humans tend to do is exhibit learned thinking, not just behavior, but learned thinking and behavior. So if I want to, if I can occupy that space with a detachment to outcome, with no ego, and I can create pause, I can frame new thinking, and I can get them to test. We frame the new thinking with visual models. If I can frame the new thinking, I can get someone to test their current thinking against different thinking and make a choice about which one will serve them best as they move forward. Now, in the context of what you're talking about, this is really where I want to get to, so it helps us unpack something you've just raised. What if the learned thinking and behavior is intergenerational trauma?
Mm-hmm.
And you're a change agent, right? So how have you... We are so off track at the moment from what I was going to ask you, but that's okay.
No, I love this. I'm learning so much. This is wonderful.
If the learned thinking in the worlds, some of the worlds that you're operating in, right? You've got this premise that if we change how we love our children, we can change the future. So and love. So what their learned thinking and behavior between stimulus and response is, let's say, intergenerational trauma, right?
I can give you an example if you like. So,
yeah.
Stimulus, my child wants unconditional love. My child wants me to love them just for existing, not for achievement, not for being the smartest child in class, going on stage and memorizing a holy verse, etc. My child just wants me to unconditionally love them. The intergenerational trauma is that you don't achieve if you're unconditionally loved, you're not safe if you are unconditionally loved, sorry. You won't be successful in life. You will be unsafe. You will die if you're unconditionally loved, because you don't learn to strive and work hard and all of those things. And so the response is that parents feel that it's their duty to conditionally love their children. They feel like they're doing something good for their children by withdrawing love and making love feel like it's limited.
Yeah.
And making their children feel like they have to work to be unconditionally loved. Whereas if we did create the pause, we would realize that that the research says that unconditional love makes children achieve better academically, have better mental health and physical health, and future employment opportunities, and all the good things that we want for our children. But we don't have the pause. We have the intergenerational trauma of the love that we've been raised in. And so we have the stimulus and the response in so many aspects of parenting.
So it's interesting. So stimulus is the child just wants love, like children do. The learned intergenerational trauma behavior is love to children don't achieve or survive. And therefore the response is, I'm going to love conditionally. I'm going to make love earned.
Yeah.
That they've got to earn my love. And so that's in this model, that's what they're wrestling with, right? And so the idea is, if you can create pause, and pause has to happen here, let's just interrupt the pattern, right?
Yeah.
And then you put a different frame in, not through ego and not as opinion. It's
Mm.
just well, what if this was true? What if unconditional love actually drives success? But you've got to be able to frame it. And when you only use words, it's your words against their words, right?
Yeah.
And that ends up being a conflict of opinion. So you've
Yes.
got to find a way of framing that is unexpected. It's the other reason we use models. And then, you want them to test your framing against their framing for them to see which one might do a better job. Now, here's the key. Your framing is based on the future beyond the response.
Yeah.
So it's actually a bigger frame with
Yes.
greater promise. And if you can
Yes.
express that in a powerful way, the test will start to challenge the truth of the learned behavior. And so, I mean, Viktor Frankl, you know, just and
This is
logotherapy. How did he even
yeah.
think about this in the inside concentration? And they didn't have paper. He wasn't making notes.
Oh,
He was
he's
doing all this in
incredible.
his head and holding it in frame, and
Yeah.
like by observing the psychology, the
His
concentration.
huge heart to be able to think of meaning and to be able to think of human psychology and how to improve the lives for all of
For
humanity,
sure.
despite enduring one of the
Yeah.
one of the
It's it's
darkest
it's it's
chapters of
it's
human
it's
history.
it's wild, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was not the
And
direction that we move in, but
Simon, I just want to conclude that, and then we can definitely go back on track. But I think one of the insights that I derive from that is the stimulus that I never actually thought about it as a stimulus, but I think that's really insightful to frame it as that a child's bid for love, which
yeah,
happens 50 times a day,
yeah,
is a stimulus.
yeah.
And parents can choose how they respond to that and can see the intergenerational traumatic patterns in how they can respond to that. But that in itself is such a valuable insight for my work at
Sure.
Rahma to think about. Uh, all the times that your child wants to show you something, all the times that your child wants you to hug them to sleep, all the times your child challenges a certain behavior of yours, that's a bid for unconditional love.
Mm,
Martin Luther King says something beautiful. He says that children are the closest to God, or children are the closest to love and what love
mm,
is meant to be. So for me, I take that as children are the closest to what unconditional, authentic, proper, healthy human love is meant to be. And if we're finding that we have blocks in how we accept our children's love or how we can love our children, then there is some intergenerational trauma or some trauma there that needs to be resolved.
mm.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, and my guiding light is that she knows how to love. And if there's mismatch, I'm wrong and I need to fix something in myself. And that rule has always worked. It's
Mm.
been amazing to learn from her. It's incredible to think about how life renews itself, and we have these children who know how to love properly, know how to have human relationships properly, and we're so privileged to learn from them, learn everything from them, especially how to love authentically.
Well, children are born with only two skills. The first skill is seeking nourishment.
Hmm.
They know they need
Hmm.
nourishment. They know they need sleep, and then the other skill is seeking love.
Mm.
They're the only two skills they have when they're
Uh-huh.
born. And
Yes.
then it's either it continues to be poured into them as they grow through the years, or it gets stripped out of them. And so, by the
Yeah.
time someone hits adulthood, they have this compilation of everything that's compounded over the top of the two survival skills that they were born with, which
Yeah.
is seek love and seek nourishment.
Yeah.
And, so it's possible that your 5-year-old has more wisdom than you
Absolutely.
in at least
Yes.
those two things, right?
Yes,
But
and
it's
I will try not to destroy it in her. I will try my absolute best to protect her from society's patterns of conditional love, telling us that humans don't deserve love, telling us to just work, 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 grind, 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 and that that's the meaning of life. Whereas we know that the key to a good life, Harvard study, is love and human
yeah,
connection. And Simon, you've actually touched on another key wisdom that we've learned at Rahma,
yeah.
that unconditional love is as core a human need as food and water. So you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. Children are born with those two things, and they are equally important.
Interesting. And is that an observational learning, or is there research behind that as well? That
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, One of my follow-up questions for you from the other, from your model is, how do you deal with the anxiety of slowing down and the pressure that we have on us to, speed up, produce outputs, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the times at Rahma where we succeeded in leaving the anxiety behind and slowing down as an organization is when we did our research about what love is.
hmm,
We slowed down for 8 months to produce our best work ever and our most used work by the global community, which is about what love is, what it is, what are the elements of it, what is unconditional love. And it's been marvelous for me, for our team, for everyone we interact with, for everyone we share this with, and for the entire community. The feedback that we get is just like, it just makes us marvel at what a privilege it is to do this work. So the research comes from all aspects. We looked at psychiatry research, like Richard Schwartz's research on internal family systems. We looked at Carl Jung and the original founder of psychotherapy.
yeah.
Looked into Freud's theories. I'm glad Carl Jung built on them because they weren't very usable. Looked into Brene Brown's research, and she's
Hmm,
an incredible researcher on what
hmm.
love is. And she has one of my favorite definitions on love, that it involves seeing another person, allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to be fully seen and to connect with another person. And that it requires so much self-work, and that loving ourselves sets a limit, or not being able to love ourselves potentially sets a limit for our ability to love others.
Mm.
And that it must involve positive behaviors like respecting others and other things. She's got one of the most beautiful definitions I've come across. We also looked into ancient Islamic wisdom because of the community we work with, like poets like Rumi and
Yeah.
Hafiz and others, who distilled what love is into beautiful poetry, and who wrote beautifully about love for family members, love for others, romantic love, and love for God.
Pause is a superpower in so many ways. And I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's work. Her
Yes, she's
work
such a
on
star.
vulnerability, yeah, her work on vulnerability and shame
Yes.
at
Oh,
the time was not spoken about, so it was quite stunning when she released it. One of the questions you asked was, um, how do you how do you deal with the anxiety of slowing down in the world, right? But the world's big and busy. And it kind of goes back to that stimulus thing. How important is the stimulus? Well, not only is it important, but also the other side of stimulus is there's so many of them. So which ones do you choose to focus on, right? And stimulus occur in a couple of ways: the stimulus that comes through pressure, or the stimulus that will bring value if you resolve them. And we're not good at determining the two. And we tend to react to the stimulus that are bringing pressure, so stacked stimulus, many of them,
yeah.
as opposed to this one stimulus I'm going to react to is that my daughter just wants me to love her, and so I'm actually going to spend some time on that. So how do you deal with that? I think one of the things that actually works against pause is in fact technology. We're not going to talk about we're not going to have an episode here about AI, but AI removes the pause from thinking rather than putting the pause into thinking. So you go and ask a question, chat gives you an answer. Thanks for that. On to the next piece, right? Whereas if you have to sit down and write something yourself, you have to get your mind in order. you have to start to structure your thinking, and you can tell when somebody has not written the thing themselves first, and they've just gotten chat to spit it out in response to a question, versus the people that have written original work and then maybe use chat to tidy it. And so, scrolling on phones and things like that, I often say to people, Newton would have never noticed gravity if he'd had an iPhone, because he would have missed the apple falling, right? He would have been scrolling. And so, I'm not sure. I don't feel like we've got the balance and the mix right yet in terms of how we're interacting with technology. Technology's a part of the world today. But I think but it has to start with awareness internally, self-awareness. You talked about you slowed down for 8 months and did some of the best work that you've done. I haven't asked you to tell us about Rahma Health, actually, and the work you're doing. So why don't we do that? I mean, we've kind of launched into it and started having a pretty rich conversation, but I'd love people to know more about what you're doing worldwide. You've hinted at it, but actually tell us about the work.
Yes, I would love to. Rahma is a parenting and health charity. So we provide Arabic and English health and parenting resources to all families worldwide. We are just at the beginning of our journey. So the organization was founded in 2021 when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I saw how unfortunately, how far behind Arabic resources were when I compared them to English resources. English resources were so rich with the latest evidence on the importance of love, the importance of skin-to-skin contact with children, the importance of play, free play, letting children be at one with nature. Whereas, unfortunately, Arabic resources were maybe 50 years behind. They were still advocating for time in the corner as a discipline thing, or hitting your children as something that can make them achieve more in the future, and definitely advocating for conditional love. And that made me absolutely mad, because there are so many women around me who are absolutely trying their best and were trying to access the best resources out there. And unfortunately, those were the best resources available to them. My community has endured so much trauma, from colonialism to wars to racism and poverty and so many things. And there is so much that we want to do. The parents in my generation are so motivated to break into generational cycles and to lead healing for our community. And we just need the resources. We just need the resources and the support and the time and the safety to do that. My initial thing was to look at, search and find and try to find who else is doing this work. Unfortunately, no one else was doing this work in a community-led way. And so the work that existed wasn't trusted. And that's how the Rahma journey started. And it's been thrilling and such an honor to do this work since.
Well, I want to dig into, because by every measure, you've created a lot of momentum with this. I also want to check in on pronunciation. I'm using an Australian pronunciation, saying, Rahma. Can you give me the pronunciation accurately?
Absolutely. I think that's the best pronunciation you might get to, Simon, and I love that pronunciation. I totally accept it and know what you're talking about. In Arabic, it's Rahma. So stronger R, Rahma, and Rahma.
Yes.
But Rahma is totally fine.
So I probably can't actually get that sound to come out of my mouth without
maybe we can practice over a year, yes. And then see how.
So you've lived a multilingual life, and there are lessons in language. And you're also communicating with people worldwide and trying to create change across multilingual communities and things like that. And sometimes people don't ever get outside of their own world, right? And one of the things that often limits a person's world is language, right? So sometimes people don't get outside of their language world, the people that all speak the same language as them. But of course, language is a gateway to everything else. Language is one of the big indicators of a different culture, for example.
Yeah.
So what have you, as you've crossed language cultures. What are some of the lessons you've learned about creating change when you're crossing cultures that might not be your own, or even languages that you're not familiar with? You could have got bent out of shape about how I was pronouncing it, but your response was stimulus response. I reckon that's as close as you're going to get to it with your Australian English language patterns. This is actually what it is, which is a great response, right?
I really appreciate that you tried, and that's the beautiful thing in human connection. Like we
Yeah.
try and we try our best, and other people see that. Like I think if we go back to the start of our conversation, for example, in medical training, we get a lot of training from some of the most incredible Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander educators, and a lot of the time they say that if you have a question, as long as you ask with authenticity and humility and kindness, it
Yeah.
will be received by the other person with authenticity and humility and kindness. You don't have to know all of the answers. You don't have to stop yourself from asking just in case you might offend the other person. So yeah, I saw you beautifully trying to pronounce an Arabic word, and I was so grateful that you tried to pronounce it and checked in
So,
with me. That was really kind.
so yeah. So I'll try to get it right for the rest of the episode. But is that your starting point when you're trying to? You only found it in 2021, right? So this is
Yeah.
like, I know, COVID's happening. This is a good time to launch something, um, worldwide. That's not everybody's first thought. So only 2021, but it's built phenomenal momentum, right?
And unfortunately, I've had to work part-time on it because I'm a medical doctor as well.
Yes,
So it's been
emergency doctor, right? So
uh,
intense.
recently transitioned to general practice.
Okay.
But yes, at the moment, combining emergency medicine and general practice, it's beautiful.
So you're trying to create change. You're trying to create change at a worldwide level. You're trying to create change across cultures. You're trying to learn from across cultures in a space that a lot of people might not even be aware of. So all of that sounds hard. So you've just indicated you lead in with just understanding where someone's at. But what have been some of your go-to principles when you're leading something like this to just bring people along on the journey? I clearly get a sense that you don't bludgeon people into submission. So
Absolutely.
what
Not
apart
that
from
that would work for anyone anyway.
no, but so apart from what you've already indicated, which is I just really appreciate that you tried. What have been some of your go-to principles to really, and you've also already spoken about making people feel safe, right? So I'd love to expand on two or three other go-to principles that you've found yourself over the years, like I keep doing this because it works when I'm trying to do this sort of work. Anything popping to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I've written down three things. Listening, respect, and love.
Right.
Even within one culture, you can have people who have different values and people who have different life experiences. And we've experienced that at Rahma. Within our Melbourne community, we've had people with different values who've given some feedback that we've had to seriously consider at Rahma. And our first go-to step, which has been 100% successful all the time, is listening.
Hmm.
Slowing down, creating the pause, exactly like you said, Simon, and just listening to the feedback, listening to where they're coming from, listening to their values, listening to their lived experience, and truly listening to what they're saying, as well as what's beneath the three layers, at least beneath what they're saying. Our community has been through a lot, and there is a lot of intergenerational trauma behind what people are saying, and a lot of hurt and a lot of fear, fear for our children, fear for the community's future, fear for the community's safety. And so it's really important to create a safe space when we listen to people. Respect, always respecting people and respecting that people might have different values and different life experiences and different cultures. So we always respect the values of other people and try to integrate that into what we do. When we created our Ramadan fasting resources, we really leaned into respect. it's a very sensitive topic, and as an organization, we decide after reviewing the medical evidence, we decided as an organization to encourage people not to fast while they're pregnant or not to fast while they're breastfeeding if they can. But if and of course, saying that the medical evidence currently is still grey, it's still low quality, low to medium quality at best. But the medical evidence might indicate that there are some adverse effects to the mother and the child if a mum fasts during pregnancy and breastfeeding. And so, as a medical organization, we recommend that people don't consider not fasting, but we respect how special Ramadan is for people. And it's Ramadan at the moment, and it's a magical time of year. We respect that pregnant women and breastfeeding women want to be included in those festivities. And so, we respect people's love for this time and respect people's love for community and encourage doctors that for women who do choose to fast, they can educate them about hydration, about sleep, about getting support with other children so that they're not running around, and how can they support them to respect their culture.
Yeah.
And the third one is love, like just truly approaching others from a perspective of love and seeing their humanity. And I think that always works for us in every single context. On your bilingual, multi-languages idea, I think that brought up a really interesting idea for me. It's such a privilege to have experienced multiple different cultures across my life. I think it makes you free of all of the assumptions that cultures make. Like
Mm.
some of the cultures I've experienced have been really individualistic, some have been really communal. Some cultures have really prioritized family, others have really prioritized just you as an individual. And so it's really nice to be able to experience different cultures because then you can just choose what resonates with you and what is truth for you. It's really liberating to not just have lived in the same ecosystem or the same culture throughout my whole existence. It really helps you evaluate ideas.
What an interesting thought that multicultural awareness is a liberation, uh,
Yeah,
not something to be fearful of, which sadly is part of the world today.
yeah,
It's interesting. You're a refugee. You're a refugee, and that there must have been lasting. How old were you
I
when
was
that?
10,
Okay,
9, 10.
yeah. So you had your life before, and then the
Yeah.
life after. So, and 10 is a high impact age. It
Mm.
must have left imprints on you, and you must have had enormous lessons out of that experience. So I don't need you to relive the experience for entertainment value. I'm really interested in what do you learn from an experience that most people will never have. Most people are not going to have to change their entire world like that, and not necessarily out of choice, right? So what would you say the big lessons were that you've brought forward into the work that you're doing?
There is actually a really, really powerful lesson that has totally informed everything I do,
Right.
and that's gratitude to be alive. Unfortunately, war really makes you realize that life is fragile and life can end. And for me, it's just created so much liberation again, and so much freedom, and so much responsibility to live the best life I possibly can. Because I'm alive. I could have died at 9, and that could have been the end of it all. I remember when I was 15, until 15, I was expecting adults to change the world and adults to fix the world and to make things better for all of us and the people in authority, etc. At 15, I realized that adults were as scared as I was, and that people in authority were just, keeping balanced systems that they didn't really understand and sort of just going with the flow, and that adults just feared collapse and feared lack of safety. They weren't trying to create a better world for all of us because they were too fearful. And so I realized that it was up to imperfect people like me to try to create a better world for all of us. And because I had experienced war, I was so grateful to be alive, so grateful for the opportunities that I had. And again, back to your bicultural point, because I had experienced Iraq and experienced absolute poverty and lack of opportunity in Iraq, that I saw how incredible it was to have so many opportunities in Australia. Like in Australia, everyone can change the world. You have access to everything. So, yeah, it was a really traumatic time, but I am, I would not wish it upon anyone. Uh, there have been many hours spent in therapy trying to recover from the experience of war, but it definitely has made me realize what a privilege it is just to be alive.
Yes, and would you even be doing the work you do today had that not been a part of the journey? So it leads me to a slightly different topic. You have a 5-year-old daughter who obviously has been raised in Australia
Yeah.
and has not been through war. And the two of you wrote a book called Kookaburra Kindness. Now,
Yes.
we have this amazing bird in Australia called the kookaburra, which is
Yes.
extraordinarily unique. And
Yes.
we have some of them that sit on our back fence
How
most
lucky for
days,
you.
and
Ah,
our dog is just obsessed with them. And the songs that we grew up with, like Laugh, Kookaburra Laugh, because
yeah, one of
its
my
sound
daughter's
is so unique.
favorites.
What is the message of Kookaburra Kindness? This book that you
Yeah.
co-authored.
So, unfortunately, we had a terrible tragedy happen in Australia. In December 2025, we had a terrorist incident happen in Sydney where
Yeah.
someone attacked Jewish people who were celebrating Hanukkah at the beach. And we saw that Australians rose up in that moment to protect them. So many people rose up in that moment to save lives, to protect, to sacrifice their own lives to protect others and protect people who they didn't see. We saw so many people the next day line up to donate blood. We had record-setting numbers of people wanting to donate blood in order to help support the hospitals and support the healing of people who were injured. Uh, in the months after, we've had people really lean in and support Jewish colleagues, support the community around them, support everyone who might feel like an outsider, might feel not included in Australian society, and lean in to heal our fabric as an Australian society and an Australian community. And that was so inspiring to see that in the midst of tragedy, Australians chose kindness and connection. And that's what we wrote in the book, my daughter and I, uh, in order to show that those are the values that Australians live by.
Mm.
I unfortunately I experienced a lot of racism growing up in Australia, a lot of comments about my skin color, about my hijab, about my religion, about initially when I couldn't speak English at all when I first arrived. Lots of racist comments and lots of discrimination because of my inability to speak English. So the Australia that I experienced was really terrifying and really traumatizing for a child. I want my daughter and every child to have a completely different experience of Australia. I want my daughter and every child to be able to bring their full self to any context in Australia and to be able to be welcomed for their full person, their full personality, every element of their identity. The Kookaburra Kindness is one of the ways that we're doing that. So we're hoping to connect and heal across differences in Australia and create a better Australia for all of us.
Mm. It's kindness should be a cornerstone of most communities, and the idea of mateship and look after the community has been a part of Australia. There's no doubt that the Italian and Greek children that came out post World War II, were treated differently. Our own Aboriginal people, and I think that's something that every country experiences and has, but there has to be an equal and opposite force, or a greater than and
Mm.
opposite force, actually, to move forward. And I saw this most fascinating um, interview with Nelson Mandela after he'd been the Prime Minister of South Africa. And, you know, the, the person asked him, was talking to him about being the hero of, getting rid of apartheid, keeping people apart through hatred in South Africa. And he said, I'm actually not the hero of that. The hero of that was de Klerk, the Prime Minister. And so he said, the only people, the people that can really make change are the people with power.
Mm.
And if you don't have the power, you have two options. One is revolution, and the other one is evolution. And evolution is much slower, but you do it with kindness and you get a bigger result. And
And a
you know,
more
just
enduring result.
yeah, and like he went on much longer than that, but you know, this guy's just spent 27 years in jail and then become
Yeah.
best friends with his jailers once
Yeah.
he's free, and you know, becomes the prime minister of a country and enlists the rugby team, you know, to represent all of South Africa and make rugby a game that every South African would be proud of at the World Cup, whereas previously it had been a white South Africa sport. And his whole and you know, he said early in my protesting career, I was a terrorist. You know, we were doing stuff, but then, you know, 27 years in jail, I figured the better way is actually just kindness and understanding. And, you know, it's longer and it's harder and it requires more courage, right? So it seems like, you know, attack is the easier option.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it just doesn't make it smart. I love the idea of
Um,
Kookaburra kindness, even as a concept, because I love kookaburras.
of course,
People
and they're your adopted pets.
They are, and people should go and listen. People should go to YouTube and get a
Oh,
video to listen to the laugh of the kookaburra.
yes,
You know, it's
they're
quite a
distinctly
thing.
cool.
You,
Simon, I recently finished a book called The Holy and the Broken by Itai Flesher that talks about a similar idea that just ignited the most excitement that I've ever felt in my life. The book is from a peace worker who lives in Israel in Jerusalem, and
right,
he's a peace worker working with youth, with Palestinian and Israeli youth, in order to connect them. And one of the ideas that he talks about, which resonated so deeply with me, is how peace is not a 2-day effort. Peace is at least a 20-year effort.
yeah,
And that successful peace building efforts, such as the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, actually started 20 years before the Good Friday Agreement. That resonated so deeply with me, especially because of our work on unconditional love. Unfortunately, lots of parents who we work with, and actually, like almost every single parent around the world, almost every single human has been raised on conditional love. And I've been thinking that our revolution in authentic, healthy love has to be a 20-year revolution in order to let people slowly feel safe, slowly start to accept it, slowly experiment with, unconditional love in some aspects of their life, and then experience the healing, and then slowly grow that. Simon, if I can derail us again, if you had to create a model for a 20-year revolution in unconditional love, what would that look like?
well, that is a challenge, isn't it?
Thank you.
Let me
If
let,
anyone's up for it, if anyone can do it, it's you.
let me get my iPad.
I truly believe that unconditional love is how we heal as humans, our physical and mental health and social health, and that unconditional love is the core to our well-being.
Yeah, I actually have a model that I built a long time ago,
Oh,
which
is
I
this the
act,
futures model?
the futures model.
Yes, I saw your work is amazing.
So the futures model is you know, it's the model I use every time I get into a conversation about time frame, right?
Mm. Hmm.
And if we said 20 years down the track, now time is interesting. Time does two things. Time always wins. So there's nothing we can do about this in 2046, will be 20 years down the track. It's
Yeah,
inevitable. Time
that's
always
true.
wins. It passes and it always wins. But the other thing time does is it compounds everything. And so if we don't do well, if we just drift through the next 20 years,
Simon, that is so simple but so profound. Yes, it does compound
it
everything and
compounds downwards,
just
right?
go on.
It
Yes.
compounds the negative downwards, which means it
Yeah.
gets worse faster.
And it compounds the
As
positive as well.
and then it will compound upward to wonderful. And the opposite of that is decisions. The difference between where we're going to land in 2046 is the difference between decision and action versus drift. And here's the thing for me: if we tried to define what a situation could look like in 2046, you and I could have a very deep conversation about what would that need to look like in 2046 for everybody to be feeling wonderful about everything, right? And peace in this case. Mm-hmm. So we're 20 years down the track and peace has been achieved. So what does that mean? We at least have to be able to agree on what peace looks like in 2046, right? So, we'd want to get into some deep conversations and get some really specific articulation of that. It is equally important to be clear about what failure would look like. And the reason is simple. If you don't define what the failure looks like, if we take this away, and I'll just make that small so I can get it back. If you only have the green line and you fall off the green line, there's no floor to fall through and you just keep falling. Wow. If you don't have a great articulation of what red would look like, there's no boundary on how far you can fall.
Absolutely. So it's really red line would create pause and force us to reflect.
Correct. So if we find ourselves coming off, and no one falls off the green line, they just behave their way off the green line. And so if we find ourselves behaving our way off the green line, amber probably runs through the middle, but it's an up and down journey. And we seem to be able to fall, as humans, we seem to be able to fall through amber easily. And the best example I've got of that is, what do you do on a green traffic light?
You stop. Oh, sorry, you go.
Green, you go.
Green traffic light.
Yeah. What do you do on red?
You stop.
What do you do on amber?
Depends.
Depends correct.
You're in
depends
a rush.
how close you are, right? And how fast you're going. It depends. And a lot of people punch the accelerator and drive harder and faster into danger, right? And so we're not well calibrated on amber. And so what happens is people behave their way off the green line, they hit amber and ignore it, but red is undeniable. And so, but if we're drifting along on red, this is never achievable, right? And so we really have to sort of look at this and go, well, do we agree on what would we consider to be peace in 20 years? What would we consider to be a failure? Now, if the red is not no peace and the red is not war, the red is never that lowest level. Like if this was a company and we said, what would we consider successful revenue? And they might go $100 million or $20 million or $100,000, whatever size company. 20 years down the track, what would you consider to be great revenue, right? And they go, oh, $100 million. What would failure be? And they go, well, no revenue. No, that's not correct. Company's already dead at that level. What's the red number? The red number could be $75 million. It's the number that no longer allows you to operate with freedom and choice. It's the number that no longer allows you to operate in the space between stimulus and response and constantly create new outcomes and new responses. So, we spend $75 million just opening and closing the doors every day. Well, that's the red number, and so if you're falling through that, that's a problem, right? Whatever the red is, it's irrecoverable. When we hit red, we can't recover from it. And so here's the key to it. 2046, 20 years, we want to have peace, whatever that means. We want to have the red, whatever that means. But people act as if they're already in the future. And they go, that gap is so big, why bother?
That's true. So many people are afraid of how hard the work is and just see it as impossible.
Correct. What people don't realize is right now, in the present moment, you're as close to that green line as you're ever going to be. None of the past matters anymore.
Wow.
Right in this moment, you're as close to that green line as you're ever going to be. And so the first decision, the first choice is, are we going to jump to the green line? And how would we do that? How would we just get on the green line? There's no big payoff yet. but we have a plan, and we have a sort of a conviction here that we could get there. And then how do we keep ourselves on the green line so we don't behave our way off the green line as time goes on? But this starts to compound. It gets easier as time goes on. The hardest bit is back here or up here if you're not on the green line. If you're not on the green line at 2046, high risk, high cost, maybe impossible. The hardest piece is just jumping to the green line. And so, you know, when he says peace is a 20-year process, of course he is, because peace is a compounding outcome, right? It's not going to happen from one piece of work from one individual. And then the real story of the futures model is that none of us are really, let me get this, none of us are actually in the business of creating one future. We're really all in the business of creating multiple futures that set up the starting point for the next generation so that the overall trend looks like that. What if in our future we didn't get this done and it meant that the next generation was starting down here?
Yeah.
Or even here? We lose the whole trend. So I don't know if that answers the question.
This is beautiful. We totally owe it to the next generation to be on the green line as much as possible.
Of course.
Simon, I am greedy for more learning. I want to run an ecosystem of companies that all create world peace, to keep unconditional love, wonderful positive outcomes. If you had to depict an ecosystem of companies working together on this model, would you still keep it to one line, or would you depict each player on the ecosystem as a green line? How would you depict it on this model?
They would each have their own line specific to the outcomes they're creating, right? But I think you would have one line.
Oh, so as an individual, you would have one line.
Well, you and what you're representing. So the ecosystem would have one line, but you really are the ecosystem. I mean, ecosystems are interesting. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with Richard Branson, and the Virgin Group of companies are pretty extraordinary. And so much of the value system of all of the other companies is based on the value system of Virgin Unite, which is the not-for-profit charitable division of it, right? And so it's an ecosystem of companies. They all, are trying to demonstrate a green line future in the context of what they do. But the overall unified force also has its own green line. And, you might say an ecosystem, but what is the Virgin Group of companies if Richard Branson's not there? He's the brand, right? And, they have a 100-year Branson family plan because they're trying to create a 100-year green line around the contribution piece, if you like. So I would have a model for each of the companies, but I would have an ecosystem model, which really is your model, actually. And, the interesting thing in the world today, AI has caused the marketing world to focus more on the person than the company. The personal brand is a more important deal than the company brand because of the way AI is gathering information. I mean, one of the things that AI looks at when people want to find out who's around and who can help them is Reddit and Wikipedia pages and things like that. It's looking for people. And so the face of the brand has all of a sudden become critically important again. So, it's a pretty interesting thing. And what is an ecosystem if it's not, a shared agenda that's holding it together? So the ecosystem would have its own future as well. But, think about a 20-year plan to get to peace. That plan simply is day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. Are we drifting or making decisions? That ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Are we drifting or making? Drift always goes down. Are we drifting or making decisions? It's, and once again, pause and patience becomes important, right? You have to be patient for the compounding effect to kick in, but it will. if you've done all the foundational work. I'd love to ask you, um, first of all, I want to thank you because this is not at all the episode I expected, but I've had fun.
This has been brilliant. I learned so much. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights. It's been
What,
incredible. It's been very intellectually stimulating. I'm sure
and
everyone watching this or listening to this will feel will enjoy it and learn a lot from it and feel very intellectually stimulated and really learn from the models that you created.
and I appreciate you sharing lessons from experiences, right? These are lessons that only experiences can actually bring. And I'd love to wrap up by asking you three quick questions
Yeah.
for quick responses. And I don't even know how appropriate this is, given that up until the age of 9, you're in a war-torn area and things. I mean, one of the questions I often ask is, what did you want to be when you grew up? And you might actually say, I wanted to be alive.
A doctor.
A doctor. You did want to be a doctor.
Absolutely a doctor. Ever since I was aware of what careers were,
Right.
I think I saw the power of healing and the power of medicine, and I love human relationships, one-on-one relationships. So yeah, I've wanted to be a doctor forever.
Fantastic. And then in that case, or not in that case, but then if you could have been in any significant conversation in history and you just get to observe it and you get to see the politics at play, the thinking at play, and it's a big conversation that's changed something significant. What conversation would have fascinated you to be able to witness?
Oh wow, that's such a
Big
powerful
question.
question. Yeah. Oh wow. I recently read a book that Mother Teresa wrote. It will be interesting to have a conversation with her, but to witness a conversation. I recently finished Martin Luther King's autobiography. Uh, I think at the moment I'm thinking about his stand on Vietnam and how he took a brave anti-government stance at that time, which I'm sure, which, as he writes in the book, cost him a lot.
Mm,
Cost him a lot of friendships, cost him a lot of government relationships, cost him a lot of pushback, and cost his mission uh, a lot as well because people criticized that he was getting deviated from his racial rights mission and going
yeah,
into anti-war. But he felt like it was so true to who he was and his values, and so he stood up. He stood up anyway and spoke out against the Vietnam War anyway.
yeah,
So it'll be really interesting to see, like maybe his conversations with his wife at that time, and whether he needed courage in order to take that stand, whether he needed to think through things through, whether he had any self-doubt. And I'm sure, like no matter how brave you are, you would have self-doubt and you would have fears when doing anything new and anything courageous.
yeah. I would love to have been in any of the conversations that Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King were having. I would have
Oh,
been
yeah,
really happy just to sit
they
on,
would
on
be
any of them.
transformative.
Well, I would love to have seen just how they carried themselves, in because lots of their conversations would have been challenging. But we know now historically that they're giants. And if you could just click your fingers and solve a big problem, what would you love to solve?
Uh, Actually, this problem is something that you mentioned earlier in the podcast, and I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up or not. But a lot of women I know are survivors of childhood sex abuse, and a
Yes.
lot of so many women are survivors of assault and exploitation, systemic, by powerful men, uh, by any men who have power over them. I guess they don't have it to be powerful men. Um, and because of my own trauma and because of how much it triggers and how much it brings up, and uh, because of like how much it actually impacts my own ability to work, I've been avoiding the Epstein files at all costs
Yeah.
and trying to avoid social media to not learn about them. Uh, so I don't know enough to be able to speak about them on this podcast, but I think women's rights will be a wonderful issue to solve, and it will be good for all of humanity if we can respect children and respect women. It would add uh, it would add half of human potential back into the system. And yeah, part of unconditional love and world peace and solving that equation is respecting women, respecting children, not exploiting women, not exploiting children, not exploiting boys, not exploiting anyone, and putting
It'll add,
on full
it would add
humanity.
more. It would add more than half back. Quite early in our podcast, I interviewed Rosie Batty, and for people who don't know who Rosie Batty is, she is just an extraordinary human being. And Rosie's ex-partner uh, got her 10-year-old son at soccer practice and killed him. And Rosie was in publicity at the time. And so she sort of became, family violence public figure number one because she could speak and have herself on camera, and
Yeah.
she just must be such an extraordinarily strong woman. And that was a paradigm shifting episode for me in just understanding more about family violence. I mean, one of the comments that she made that landed hard for me is people, and so that he killed his son. That's different to sustain sexual abuse over time, but it is family violence and it's abuse of a child. And she said, people dress this up and call it domestic violence and family violence, but the reality is he murdered my son.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's no hiding what actually happened.
Yeah.
And we'll have to kind of tick the episode up before we leave here and just let everybody leave with let's go and change the world. But I would encourage people to go back and watch that episode because it is a real reframe on abuse, right? Which is real in the world, and through the lens of someone directly in the mix of that. And what just inspires me, Naba, in the world are people like you and Rosie and so many others that we've had the honor to have on the podcast and in episodes to talk through that are trying to do big things in the world, not to become billionaires, but because there's things to be done. And I think that's the great hope. Actually, there are many, many people in the world that want to do things just because there's things to be done. And but then that requires skill and courage, vulnerability, willingness to step forward, and everything else. And
Yeah, Simon,
I think that
if I can link that back to your work, I think money is one of the distractions that we like fictitious deadlines. I feel like money is a fictitious thing that they tell us will make us happy, but that doesn't make anyone happy. Research shows that once you have enough money, I don't know, I
yeah,
don't know if it's still $72,000 a year. I'm sure it's changed now with inflation, but whatever that number is, that after that, your happiness doesn't increase. So again, it's one of the fictitious things that I would include in your category
yeah.
of things that distract us from wisdom and distract us on true from wisdom and from true value. So it's again about slowing down and realizing what's important, what work actually needs to be done, what work actually heals the world collectively for all of us. And separating ourselves from all the lies that we get told. Like one of them is that we are separate, that your happiness doesn't matter to my happiness, but actually every human's happiness matters to our collective happiness. Daniel Siegel's work on how intra-connected we all are and how our psyches are all actually connected
Mm.
is so innovative, and it just makes us realize that one person's gain is all our gain. And unfortunately, a mother's pain in Israel or Gaza or Sudan or elsewhere is a parent's pain everywhere. It's a human's pain everywhere. And yeah, that's why we really have to work to heal collective humanity and the collective world in order for each one of us to heal.
Uh,
Simon, can I ask you a question that would actually really help me on my life mission as well? Uh, You interview some incredible people, you work with some incredible people, and potentially some scary people as well. I don't know enough about the Epstein files, but potentially some people who are compromised in those files. How do you sleep at night? How do you deal with potentially some really serious pedophilia, child abuse, exploitation, slavery?
I think there are many more good people in the world than bad. Um, I think by virtue of the nature of the work we do, we meet most of the good people. And one of the core values of our company is actually kindness.
Hmm.
We have four values, and one of them is kindness. And uh, I don't think you get to sleep at night by shying away from what might be bad in the world. Um, but if you can, for me personally, a big part of what helps me to feel comfortable about, you know, well, I love the work that we do, but how we choose to show up, makes a big difference. And it's just been a tenet for us to try and show up with kindness in any environment. Even people doing bad things would have a reason behind that if you looked deep enough. I do think that evil exists,
Mm.
but I think most people are good people that would actually like to make a difference. And then there are people that have been damaged.
Yeah. Uh,
And how we show up is the difference that I could make, you know?
yeah. Richard Schwartz, the incredible psychologist who developed internal family systems, works with criminals, people who've committed homicide, and other crimes, and he talks about how so much of that has been caused by their trauma and their life
Sure.
history, the terrible things that they've experienced, and how a part of them thinks that they're doing the best that they can, but that they need healing and they need unconditional love and they need to be able to connect with the capital S self within them, and other things. But I guess, yeah, our collective human healing also includes healing all of the really traumatized people who've done some scary things.
Yeah. I'm connected to a prison visit program in the US, women and men's prisons. And those programs are run by former prisoners.
Mm,
Some of them were quite violent and long prison sentences, 15 years and this sort of thing. You don't go to jail for 15 years for average stuff. What's intriguing to me is how much of a contribution those people want to make when they've done the work, uh, themselves. And it's all trauma behind what led them there in the first place. And, there is some truth to, if not for some good things happening, there go I. We could all end up in those places,
yeah,
with some small twists in life and some sliding doors. But
yeah,
I feel pretty comfortable and positive about the world because I still think there are many more good people trying to do good things, who are not necessarily in government or have the power or anything else, but just by force of their passion and their motivation, which may actually be more potent than anything else. So,
that's
you,
true.
you know,
We'll continue making good choices and climbing up that green trajectory.
yeah, follow the green line. And that seems like a
Absolutely.
great place to end the episode.
Thank you so much, Simon.
No, but thank you so much for giving us this time and actually sharing the experiences of what has been a really interesting journey and some of the big things you're trying to do.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to learn from you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.